Call the regular City Commission meeting of Tuesday, June 14th, 2011 to order. May we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we take roll?
Commissioner Bushy?
Here.
Commissioner Kellett?
Here.
Commissioner Lenko?
Here.
Commissioner Rubino?
Here.
Mayor Costelli?
Here, we're all here. Ted, am I correct that this is being taped, but we can't broadcast live from this building?
Right.
Okay, so people who catch it on tape later and wonder why it wasn't live, it's because of the building. Next item is consideration of the following minutes. Regular City Commission meeting held Tuesday, May 10th, 2011. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move the minutes of the...
Chuck?
Mr. Mayor, I move the minutes of the regular City Commission meeting held Tuesday, May 10th, 2011 be approved as recommended.
Is there support?
I support.
Questions, comments? May we take a vote?
Commissioner Kellett?
Yes.
Commissioner Bushy?
Yes.
Commissioner Lenko?
Yes.
Commissioner Rubino?
Yes.
Mayor Costelli?
Yes, motion carries. Next item is the May 2011 disbursement report. Amy?
Accounts payable and payroll for the month of May was provided to all of you prior to the meeting. Payroll was $53,369.57, and accounts payable was $407,167.70.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move the May disbursement report be approved as listed.
Support.
Any questions? May we take a vote?
Commissioner Rubino?
Yes.
Commissioner Lenko?
Yes.
Commissioner Kellett?
Yes.
Commissioner Bushy?
Yes.
Mayor Costelli?
Yes, motion carries. Next item is governmental reports. I understand Commissioner Zach's going to be late, but is coming. Any other governmental reports?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, just let everyone know our new aerial platform came through. It's being stored in Warren until we get a refab on the opening of the doorway in the station to be able to move it in and out. So we got a $970,000 vehicle, which the feds paid $675,000 through federal grant through FEMA's AFG. So new rig, ready to go, and soon will be in service once we're in the station.
How long is the station renovation going to take, Chief?
That's out to bid right now, so once the bids come in, we figured probably about 2 to 3 weeks. It's just raising the header and putting a larger door.
Okay. Thank you. Questions of the Chief? Thank you. Any other governmental reports? City Commission liaison reports, starting to my left, Commissioner Rubino.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't able to work with the schools and was at commission for most of the month.
Commissioner Bushy.
Recreation, the pool opened nearly 3 weeks now, and we've had great attendance. The swim team hosts their first meet this Friday at 5:30. Everybody come and support the swim team. Summer program starts next week. Swim lessons start Monday, and the community garden will start planning shortly, so stay tuned for the details.
Thank you. Commissioner Kellett.
Historical Commission, we had our annual home and garden tour last Saturday. It was very well attended, and we had a wonderful group of homes and gardens available for people to visit. And I think everyone would have agreed that it was a real successful tour. And we lucked out with the weather. They were talking about rain, and we just had some cool, cloudy weather in the morning, and it got a little sunny later, but it was ideal for walking around gardens and stomping around those lovely homes. So that was another successful year.
Commissioner Lenko.
The DDA and planning meeting was sort of a soft session. It just due to circumstances, our city manager and consultant could not attend, but it was well attended by residents, and there were some soft planning issues about the grant program, some proposed enhancements to the business district, and then last but not least, questions about the release of the survey. But subsequent to that, of course, we had the citywide survey session last week.
The next three items all relate to the same topic, so I'm going to introduce the agenda items together, even though they would be discussed and acted upon by the commission separately. Item 8 is consideration of the agreement between the City of Berkeley and the City of Pleasant Ridge for fire protection services. Item 9 is consideration of the notice to terminate Ferndale Fire Protection Agreement pursuant to paragraph 1 of the amendment to Ferndale Pleasant Ridge Fire Protection Agreement of July 6, 2005. Termination would be effective July 1st, 2013. And the final item would be consideration of authorizing the city manager to continue ongoing negotiations with the City of Berkeley regarding public safety. Before I turn it over to the city manager for her report and recommendations, I'd like to introduce certain people who have joined us tonight because of these items. Marilyn Steffen, Mayor of Berkeley, Jane Baez DeSessa, City Manager of Berkeley, Chief Rick Eschman, Director of Public Safety, Robert North, Deputy Director of Public Safety, Lori Kale, CEO of Alliance, and Mike Kaler of Alliance Mobile Health. Sherry.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item that the City Commission is asked to consider is a fire protection agreement with the City of Berkeley. This is a result of conversations that have been held between the City of Pleasant Ridge and the City of Berkeley with respect to consolidating, merging services for public safety. One of the things that the City of Pleasant Ridge asked Berkeley to consider was a fire protection agreement that would be effective if the City of Pleasant Ridge were to terminate its agreement, its current agreement with the City of Ferndale for fire protection. As you know, but everyone may not know, is if the city decides to terminate its contract with the City of Ferndale, there is a 2-year requirement, whereas the City of Ferndale would continue to provide fire protection services for the next 2 years if it's provided at the end of any fiscal year. In anticipation of discussions continuing with the City of Berkeley for the idea of public safety, we wanted to ensure that there would not be a lapse of any kind in fire protection for the City of Pleasant Ridge residents, and therefore this was an agreement that was reached. It was adopted and approved by the Berkeley City Council at its May meeting. It is my recommendation that the Pleasant Ridge City Council adopt it this evening.
And then going on, Sherry, would you introduce the background of the next 2 items all at one time?
Yes. All 3 items have to do with conversations and discussions, considerations about public safety. I can tell you that my conversations and contact with other communities started approximately 10 years ago. The very first thing that Pleasant Ridge decided to tackle was dispatch, because dispatch is often an obstacle, and we have found that to be true when we were participating on a committee to look at regional fire, in fact. So about 10 years ago, I met with the Ferndale City Manager first. I called him because we do have an existing relationship and contract, and I thought it would make sense and it would be reasonable to add dispatch services to the Ferndale fire contract. I met him, in fact, at a coffee shop in Ferndale because he was not comfortable at that time meeting to talk about it. And you'll remember some years ago, most cities were not comfortable talking about it, what was then called contracting services or contracting out. But in any event, we had a great conversation. It was eventually discussed that I suggested that it would be included as part of the fire contract, could lead to future services and additional cooperative ideas with the city. The number that came back, which was a number that was received from the police chief at the time, the Ferndale police chief, was about $50,000. And 10 years ago, $50,000 was a great amount of money. So we left on good terms and decided that we would continue. He would continue talking with his city and the city of Pleasant Ridge. Well, within the next few years, we started researching it. Our police chief and sergeant started exploring this idea, eventually led to a solicitation of proposals. Dispatch was eventually awarded to the city of Berkeley. And we have been with the city of Berkeley with dispatch for 8 years. All during this time, there have been continuous conversations about the concept and idea of public safety for the city of Pleasant Ridge. It is a safe and efficient way of operating an emergency department. We know that from our own experience living by Oak Park, Huntington Woods, and the city of Berkeley. So while we were talking with the city of Ferndale on options and certainly on ways of making the existing contract more efficient and affordable, these talks continued. So I'm glad that you let me explain this, because I want everyone to know that this is not something that came up a year ago. This is certainly something that has been discussed for at least the last 10 years.
And during that same time period, Sherry, or at least from 1998 forward, I believe, we've gone from a police department that once consisted of employee dispatchers and 9 full-time equivalent police officers to now having contracted out dispatch, and we have 6 police officers on staff, with our 2 part-timers most recently being cut due to budgetary concerns.
That's right. And so we looked at it knowing even then what future was ahead of us, and having experience with contracting and sharing and collaborating. This was something that we felt that at least 10 years ago, in the instance of dispatch, this would be of benefit to the city and mutual benefit to anyone we shared it with. And we had 8 or 9 full-time officers and a full-time dispatch department.
And part of the rationale behind looking at public safety is not only to control the cost of fire protection, but also to put more police manpower on the road. Is that correct?
It has always been the goal and the directive of the city commissions over the years that first and foremost, we do not sacrifice services whenever we talk about collaborating, contracting, or sharing services. So that has always been the case, and it was true during these conversations. But certainly there are ways that you can enhance an existing department in the city. We have seen that happen. And this would be a way to increase a police force that we currently have of 6, potentially 5 in the future, to a department of 32 people. That is something that this city could never afford to do. It isn't something about contracting services again. This is a very different kind of concept where this is a partnership. And from the beginning, it has been discussed that way, it has been agreed to that way, and we would not be a customer of another city. And so we could increase and enhance the skill level of our existing officers. They would become first responders, which is key to this endeavor, and would allow Pleasant Ridge to have a police department the size of a combined city of Berkeley, city of Ferndale, Pleasant Ridge.
And with respect to our existing contract, some items in the background that certainly some of them many people won't remember because they weren't here. Other people will. But the contract negotiations have, from time to time, to say the least, been contentious, and often involved a contract getting up to the point in which it was going to expire, and then somebody trying to play brinksmanship to exert leverage because the contract was about to expire. That is the reason that we have this 2-year notice provision in the contract. Actually, it was once longer. It was designed so that if either city decided the contract no longer made sense, that a minimum of 2 years' notice given by June 30th of a year would be given. And in fact, if you went to July 2nd, it ended up being 3 years' notice. In the early 1980s, when the contract was expiring and the price being offered was higher than Pleasant Ridge was willing to pay, many will remember, certainly the chief will remember, he was part of the force being trained. The proposal to cross-train the police department, the DPW department, which was then a employed DPW department, and have a volunteer fire department. Some people say the city was bluffing. I can assure you, when the city bought a gas station to turn it into a firehouse and had the basement stocked with fire equipment for the men and people were being trained, there was no bluffing going on. But a contract was eventually arrived at and continued forward for the next 12 years. When the contract was again at the expiration date, there was a lot of disagreement over whether Pleasant Ridge was paying too much, whether Pleasant Ridge was not paying enough. Eventually, a formula was arrived at to take certain line items of the Ferndale audited budget, and Pleasant Ridge would pay a percentage of those line items. And that percentage was derived by virtue of two factors evenly weighted: population and area. And so there was a reset every 10 years as to that percentage based upon the census coming out. There wasn't too much concern about being a reset because of size of the cities. As the years went by, Pleasant Ridge grew into the percentage they agreed to pay, which I believe was 11 point something percent. There was a cap on how much it could go up each year. But again, over time, that price kept creeping up. We also had the contractual requirement of committees from each city meeting at least annually to discuss issues, to discuss costs, to discuss concerns. Those meetings took place, and our request usually was, let's find a way to control costs, reduce costs. At some point in time in the middle of last decade, whether it was 04 or 05, I can't remember, there was a meeting held at the end of June. And we were told by the representatives from Ferndale that we should expect a notice of termination of the contract to be delivered within the next couple of days because they wanted to renegotiate the price of the contract. At that point in time, we indicated to them that that certainly was their contractual right to do. That's what the contract termination clause was there for. And that if they wanted to terminate the contract, that was their prerogative. But they had to realize that when we received that notice of termination, we were not going to view it as the precursor for a requirement for contract negotiations. We would look at a termination as just that, a termination, and we would be in discussions the next day with Huntington Woods or Berkeley or both. That notice of termination never arrived. Then as the years continued to go by, the contract price kept going up despite assurances that steps were being taken to cut the contract back. City manager changed. As we got ready for the meeting in 2010, when Sherry was asking then City Manager Bob Bruner why prices couldn't be controlled, why was the price continuing to go up, he said it was because of the OPEB costs. OPEB costs are something being thrown on cities in recent years that require you to actuarially reserve for the cost of retirement benefits. OPEB costs were not in the formula that we agreed to. And yet, for a period of years, they were in the numbers, and the bill we received included a percentage based upon the costs we never agreed to pay. That is what led to the amendment last year that has reduced our costs with the city of Ferndale for a period of 3 years. Had that agreement not been reached, their version of life was our contract would have been $424,000 and change this year. It was $346,500. Their version of life was it would have been $447,000 in the year that starts in 2 weeks. With the amendment, it'll be $280,000. Their version of life would have had it dropping back to $414,000 in the following year. The amendment makes it $265,000. It was only our resolve to take the matter to arbitration and to seek a refund of what we felt was being overcharged to us that led to that contract. That contract contains a mutual release in it for each city not going back on the prior years prior to that contract. In the letters of negotiation that went back and forth between the city managers as to why this number was appropriate or that number was appropriate, Bob Bruner placed a value on that release to the city of Ferndale of $228,000. I interpret that as meaning that the city of Pleasant Ridge was overcharged by at least $228,000 over a period of time. As Sherry said, we have for a lengthy period of time been exploring regional fire, regional public safety. We are part of a group of several cities that were discussing regional fire. What brought those discussions about was someone who looked at a map, looked at what standards were as far as how many firehouses you should have in a given area. And the area that he chose was what was once known as Royal Oak Township. Royal Oak Township back in the day was Royal Oak, Huntington Woods, I think Madison Heights, Hazel Park, and all the cities we know today, not just the township to the south of us. Those calculations were that there should be 8 firehouses within that district to meet standards and adequately protect the public. There are 13. And in those discussions with all the different cities and all their different fire departments and all their different chiefs, there was no resolve for anybody to cut anything. And those fell apart. Part of the reason they fell apart was the chart of protection fire departments have in Royal Oak, where they can't cut fire. So you're seeing, as part of what's happening in Royal Oak in the current budget, that I think about a third of the police have been let go, because that's a budget they can touch. We are not attempting to cut, we are attempting to enhance services. We are attempting to maintain quality fire protection while getting our police department back to the strength it should be. We had a situation a couple of weeks ago in which one of our officers who's in the room responded to a call for gunshots being fired in Royal Oak. Fortunately, that was one of the few times when there was a second officer in town at the same time, so he did have backup. Normally, he would not have had a Pleasant Ridge officer to back him up. He stopped a car, had 2 people in it, and it had the guns in it. Thank God he wasn't alone. Many times our officers go on calls, often very dangerous calls on Woodward, and they're alone. We're trying to keep that from happening in the future by exploring this option. There is a video playing on the cable station, a video chat in which I sat down with Sherry, Chief Eshman, and Deputy Chief North to explain the public service concept. It is a concept that Oak Park has successfully used for 54 years. It's a concept that Berkeley has successfully used since 1983. Huntington Woods, I don't know what their start date was, seems like forever. Beverly Hills, Fraser, where Frank was once city manager and was there at the point in time the transition took place. Basically, to describe it, police officers, fire officers are all cross-trained to do either job. There are dedicated personnel at the firehouse to bring the truck to the scene but the police officer is usually the first responder. And in this case, it would be an officer patrolling our streets that would be a first responder, with greater medical training than we have now and with certified fire training. Deputy Chief North, if you could describe it further, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everyone. The public safety concept, I'm sorry, you want me to turn around? Whichever way. I think everybody will be able to hear me anyway. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Will be my fault now. The model for public safety that we utilize in Berkeley since 1983 consists of personnel in the station that assist with desk work, prisoners, walk-in traffic, 24-hour open door to our residents and those who need us. Our officers are fully fire trained to state requirements as they are in police work. We are also medical first responders, which for practical application or explanation purposes is a step below EMT basic. We carry defibrillators in all of our cars and oxygen. We are the first ones on the scene when there's a simultaneous dispatch of police, fire, or medical emergency. Our personnel on medical run arrive prior or just prior and sometimes the same time as the ambulance depending upon the location. We're able to determine if the patient is breathing, if there's any bleeding to be taken care of. We're able to locate and secure the scene. Sometimes there's an animal that's not too happy to see you. Sometimes we have residents and neighbors or relatives who are there in a state of distress. We locate the medications, determine allergies, and prepare all this information within minutes while the ambulance is on the way. The same applies to a fire scene. When a fire call comes out, the truck is dispatched at the same time the cars are, the officers in the cars are. We respond to the scene. We determine if there's a life safety issue. We can do a size up. We can locate the hydrant. All this is done while the truck, which has been simultaneously dispatched, is on the way. It has worked successfully for us since 1983, and we enjoy tremendous support from our residents. We engage in quite a bit of community involvement, information to our community, Lifts for Kids bicycle safety program. This past week had 300 children do a bicycle safety course in helmets. We have fire safety open house, which every fire department in the county does. We involve ourselves very actively with our community, and should the decision be taken that we would be doing it here, then everyone's part of the same community. We believe in serving the public, and our model of doing it has been very successful.
Thank you. I'm going to open up the comments in a few moments.
I was going to ask him a question.
Just let me finish a couple things.
All right.
Chief, Frank, can you describe the experience in Fraser, and then I will open it up to comments from the public.
Just to let you know that Fraser has been a public safety department. I started there in 1967 and left there in 1996, and it was a public safety department probably the last 25 years I was there. There was apprehension in the beginning. People didn't know what was going to happen if we got rid of our fire department, because that was the belief. But once they realized the training of the officers and the ability to provide 3 services instead of 1, it became well accepted. In fact, while I was a manager there, the city council had decided to privatize the ambulance, and we had over 450 people show up to keep our public safety department just like it was. The officers after a while got to know the residents, they got to know each of them. It worked efficiently and it worked very, very well. And it was a tremendous cost-saving effect for us, because we didn't have to have 6 or 8 people sitting in a fire station waiting for a fire run. We had two firemen that were assigned to the fire hall for the trucks. The rest were all on the road. It gave us better coverage of our city. It gave us better coverage to our residents and more protection. And our city saw a crime drop relatively quickly after we had more officers on the road. it is a good philosophy, and it's a good policy. If it's run efficiently, as Berkeley does, and as Fraser did, you'll be very, very happy with it. We were extremely happy once we understood and once we got it into place. So I hope that answers any concerns.
I'll open it up for a while for comments, questions. Devin, you had your hand up first.
Well, I just have one question for the, I was wondering what enhanced training does an EMT have over a standard first response trained officer? I was asking that to the deputy police officer.
Oh, we have the representative from Alliance, if you can come to the microphone.
Sure. My name is Mike Fuller. I'm the operations manager for Alliance Mobile Health.
I think you're going to have to use the mic.
I don't have that booming voice. Emergency medical technicians do have additional training in administering different levels of care. They do the assessment, they can provide oxygen, they do defibrillation. A little bit more that they can do is actually testing like blood sugar, and the emergency medical technicians where the MFR level are unable to do that. They're also able to administer epinephrine with the epinephrine pen. Those are a couple of the things that they can do above and beyond, a little bit of medication administration and obviously the transport. The training is actually very similar, it's just a little bit more advanced in the emergency medical level versus the MFR.
And Mike, can you describe how Alliance works within the purview of the Berkeley system?
Yes, our model, basically we have 25 ambulances in our fleet, and we are contracted with 6 different cities in Oakland County to provide emergency 911 advanced life support. And what we do is we take our advanced life support units and station them throughout those cities that we cover. And as a 911 call comes in, we use GPS to locate the quickest unit available, the closest unit available. They respond. Once they do respond, then we move the other ambulance in that area to again cover that area that the original one was covering. So we are constantly moving our ambulances to cover the areas that we service. In the event of back-to-back calls, we do have multiple units available to back up.
And what is the cost of that per call?
The cost for the city or to the person individual?
Hi, I'm Maureen Cleo. I think I have a loud voice. I'm from Alliance Mobile Health. Can you hear me? No. We typically have 2 different rates. There's a basic life support rate and there's an advanced life support rate. And I don't have them in front of me, but I can give you a good gauge. With insurance, we bill that first, and the rate is around $450 for a basic life support ambulance, $12 per mile. And for an advance, it starts around $500, and the rates kind of go up based on emergency or non-emergency. If you don't have insurance, we have charitable care plans, we have payment options, and that usually gets brought up often. And what insurance doesn't cover, if you have a copay, you have to cover that, and those are typically how the rates work.
So under our current agreement,
Come to the microphone, please.
Name and address and questions.
yeah. So under the current agreement, then, what are we charged for the EMT to come to our house?
You still receive a bill from Ferndale Fire.
A bill. And what is the bill from Ferndale Fire as compared to a privatized company?
You had an employee, did you not, Scott, who recently had their child transported, was the charge $588, as I recall?
But that could have been advanced life support, and those rates are going to be a little bit higher.
The other, I didn't get your name, sir? Name and address for the record?
Ron Hostetler, 53 Woodward Heights.
I lost my train of thought. Next.
Does that mean I don't get any coverage?
Hello, Mayor Castelli, Commissioner Kellett, Rubino, Bushi, and Lenko, and City Manager Sherry Ball. On behalf of my family
Excuse me again, name and address for the record.
My name is Jason Krzyzak, and I live at 55 Wellesley. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your dedicated service to our community. I understand this is a very complex issue, and I hope we can dialogue and come to a consensus that is agreeable to all parties. My wife Carla, who could not be here tonight because she's attending Little League Baseball with our oldest son. My wife Carla and I, we decided to lay down roots on Wellesley Road in 2001 and have since grown our family in the rich soil of Pleasant Ridge. We have never regretted our decision and treasure every day as the childhood memories unfold for our 3 little ones on these tree-lined streets. For 10 years, we have been wholly satisfied with the stewardship Council has shown in preserving the qualities that make Pleasant Ridge unique, and I thank you for that. But recent moves by this Council and the City Manager regarding the delivery of essential emergency services has troubled both of us immensely. It is our strong conviction that the officers of our independent Pleasant Ridge Police Department and the firefighters of the Ferndale Fire Department form the indispensable pillars of this community's public safety, and any attempt to dismantle either of these pillars is misguided, unwarranted, and potentially dangerous. We understand the reality of the budgetary pressures Council is forced to deal with and would not encourage them to ignore the long-term financial health of our city. However, we believe that the safety of our neighborhoods should take precedence over all other spending concerns, and that this safety is most solidly preserved by fully funding the Pleasant Ridge Police Department and continuing the trusted 88-year-old partnership with the brave men of the Ferndale Fire Department. This attempt to fundamentally alter our public safety infrastructure has been enacted with little to no public comment or involvement. The City Council has acted independently on this issue and made determinations on future actions without any avenue for citizens to voice their concerns. We would ask each council member to reflect on what motivates them to serve the citizens of Pleasant Ridge. Do they believe that they alone have the knowledge and experience to decide matters of vital importance for their neighbors? Or did the members of this council run for office because they believe in empowering their neighbors with a voice in decision-making in their community? On matters as important as this, it is our belief that we as a community should pursue a path of involved participation. And I like to use an analogy of traditional barn raising, where community is strengthened and enhanced through participation in the decision-making process. A decision handed down by fiat from a select few will tear at the foundations of our belief in citizen participation in local government. Instead of our leaders talking down to us and subjecting us to a sales job, they should listen to us and incorporate our concerns into their judgments. Instead of our leaders hoarding power on this crucial issue, they should be entrusting us to democratically decide for ourselves. Most disturbing to me as a citizen is the attempt by the City Manager and City Council to fundamentally change the way emergency services are delivered in this community without involving us. Why was a public hearing held on the Cork liquor license, but none on the proposed reorganization of our entire public safety infrastructure? Why were we asked to increase our mills for the library services? Why were we asked to increase our mills for library services and the pool, but not for the continuation of top-notch police, fire, and EMS services? Why were the citizens of Jackson and Harper Woods, Michigan, on May 3rd of this year entrusted with deciding this very issue through ballot initiatives, while our City Council continues to move forward with no plans whatsoever to include the voters of Pleasant Ridge? Both attempts in those communities to establish public safety departments were soundly rejected by the voters. In Jackson, the margin was almost 2-1. And why were the residents of Southfield, Ferndale, Hazel Park, Pittsfield, Dexter, Lansing, and Garden City all recently able to prioritize their municipality's commitment to public safety through millage elections, while our City Council denies its voters a say on the matter? I would ask the City Council to reflect on a recent situation. Perhaps they remember last fall regarding the Ferndale School Board. And the Ferndale School Board attempted to change the date of the school board elections. On this matter, our liaison to the board, Pleasant Ridge Commissioner Frank Rubino, voiced his concerns that his constituents were being left out of the decision to switch the dates. At that meeting held on November 15th, and then in the winter 2010-2011 edition of the Ridger, Mr. Rubino strongly advocated that the citizens of Pleasant Ridge deserve to vote on any date changes. As quoted in the Ridger, the commissioner stated that, "My comments to the board were that if they think they should have a 6-year term, they should hold an election in November of 2011 and place this question on the ballot for the taxpayers to decide, not make an arbitrary decision on their own without public input." And he continued, "It is the right of the voters in the school district to determine this, and that right should not be taken away." After Commissioner Rubino reported to the full City Council at the December 14th, 2010 City Council meeting, City Manager Sherry Ball commented that she had attended that same meeting and echoed Mr. Rubino's thirst for democratic representation. Quoted in the minutes of that meeting, "Although these types of questions are not voted upon by the electoral, and the decision ultimately falls on the vote of this board, these board members are still representing the wishes and opinions of the electorate, and decisions made should reflect those opinions." I bring up this episode only to ask why the push for citizen input on a mundane matter of school board election dates, while you eventually deny those same voters the right to decide on a radical restructuring of their community's emergency services. It is clear that the council has developed a plan that they have now begun to hype without any intention of including us in the matter. I would urge this council to table agenda items 8, 9, and 10 this evening until at least giving their neighbors the courtesy of a public hearing on this issue. I would also urge my representatives to abandon any attempts to enter into a public safety agreement with the City of Berkeley and allow the citizens of this community the opportunity to decide this very important issue through either a ballot referendum or a millage vote. My belief is that through dialogue can come consensus, and I plead with this council to meaningfully engage with their neighbors on this very important matter. I thank you for your time, and I genuinely thank you for your service to the City of Pleasant Ridge. Thank you.
Elaine, you had your hand up?
Hi, Elaine Zack, Oakland County Commissioner, and rather than giving a commission report, I'm going to report as a resident of Huntington Woods, 8320 Hendry Boulevard. Lived in Huntington Woods for 31 years, and we are similar communities. I have the pleasure of representing Pleasant Ridge for 9 years, and I love your community and feel almost like an honorary representative here, resident. And I just want to speak, I understand budgets. I am so well versed in budgeting and municipal budgeting as your county commissioner, and I want to thank you all for electing me. I also want to speak as a resident to tell you that I have had public service, I've had public safety in Huntington Woods for the 31 years that I've lived there. And it really is a wonderful service, and I have enjoyed it. I have not recently had the opportunity where we have called emergency. I had a friend that was at my house for New Year's Eve, and he was having a diabetic reaction. And we had great service from public safety with the emergency ambulance. I can't, I would surmise that it's not going to feel anything different than what you have now. I just want to let you know that it is good. We do in Huntington Woods partner with Berkeley for weekend coverage and have wonderful cooperation together. I just wanted to say that it isn't a less than service. So, thank you.
I'll take it. Hi, I'm Kim Malloy. I live at 7 Kempton. I've lived in both the public service community and also in Pleasant Ridge and Southfield that had separate departments. I'm not an expert, but I think Dan Dawes from Michigan Professional Firefighters has far more expert advice on this issue. And I'd like to see if he would be able to come up and maybe say a few things about the subject. Dan?
All right. Good evening. My name is Dan Daw. I am the 6th District Vice President for the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union. I represent Oakland, Macomb, and Livingston counties and their full-time fire departments there. They're all unionized through the state. It is true I do have some experience with PSO. I have been in the fire service for 30 years. I've been in EMS for 28 years. When I first started in EMS, I actually worked for private EMS, and with that, worked with some of the public safety departments in assisting them in providing the EMS when they were out on their calls. I have extensive experience in separate divisions, in separate police and fire. I've also done a fair amount of study over the years into the different types of services and what is the most cost-effective. PSO is often touted as a very cost-effective model. Unfortunately, that is not truly the case. Yes, it can save money. However, when you cut that cost, you also cut services. If you want the same level of service that you have now, it will cost you as much, if not more. Kalamazoo Public Safety Department is often cited as the golden apple of public safety departments. They have a long-standing history of public safety. They are the largest public safety department in the country. When you compare all of the communities across the state of Michigan that are similar in demographics, tax base, size, type of response, type of service, Kalamazoo costs more than all of them with separate police and fire to provide even less service than they're able to provide separately, than those separate departments do. One of the other things, speaking of Kalamazoo, that comes up, obviously fire training and police training are two separate types of training. Both are very training dependent professions. Any of these police officers here will tell you that they take a lot of training to do. Police officers by themselves have a hard time keeping up with the amount of training that is required of them. Firefighters by themselves also have a hard time keeping up with that amount of training. Both professions see an increased amount of service delivery requirements now, specifically to the fire service. The fire service is responsible now for hazardous material incidents, responsible for technical rescue such as trench rescue, confined space, high-angle rescue, building collapse, and the like. All of these service requirements demand even more training. Kalamazoo has said they are unable to provide all the training they need. The police department has suffered for that, and they recognize that. But it's still a system that they've continued to use, even at less of a service. One of the issues that comes up, again, is also that there are more police officers on the road. Okay, that's fine. There are more police officers on the road. However, you have fewer firefighters now. It's one thing to have more police officers if you have a lot of police incidents. If you have a fire incident, you lose all those police officers. You cannot do both jobs simultaneously, whereas separate police and fire services can do both of those jobs. Often, again, as cited earlier, when firefighters are in their patrol cars as PSO officers, they arrive on the scene first. That's all fine, unless there is a safety hazard, a life safety hazard, a true life safety hazard. By federal law, they are not allowed to enter that building until another firefighter is there to go in with them and two more firefighters are on the scene to go out, or on the outside to go in and protect them, if need be. Also, a firefighter arriving on the scene without a piece of fire apparatus basically is useless, to put it bluntly. You can't fight fire if you don't have the tools. And if a fire has gone beyond the stage where somebody, such as the homeowner, could go in and stomp it out, you're in violation of federal law and you're not supposed to be in there. If somebody gets hurt, somebody dies, the cost is even greater. Another problem with the simultaneous response, police officers and firefighters are two completely different personalities. I've got a lot of police officers that are great friends, but I would never ask them to respond on medical emergencies or fight fires because it's just a different mindset. To put it simply, they're more suspicious than we are. I can use a perfect example within my own department. A very good friend of mine, a police officer, responded to a vehicle that left the road. When he arrived, he thought the driver was drunk, intoxicated. When we arrived, we immediately went the different direction and said, what is the problem here? Well, it turns out it was a medical emergency. He was a diabetic. He could see where he wanted to be but couldn't get there due to the obstacles in the way and ran off the road and ran into those obstacles. My friend wanted to arrest him. We gave him glucose and he made a miraculous recovery. Another thing, again, going back to Kalamazoo, many of the people that were there prior to the combination of that department cited the police service and the fire service. Both of those members had a passion for their particular job. It is a wonderful career. It's a fair amount of work, but we love it. It's something we like to do. Once they combined those positions, those officers came in and said, it is just a job. They lost their passion. They showed up, they did their 8 hours, and that was it. And these were people that worked for 20 years in the police and or fire services. One of the other benefits you have using Ferndale, and I'm only going to briefly mention this because there are other representatives here from Ferndale Fire that will talk about it, is the Oakway Mutual Aid Pact versus the Oakland County Mutual Aid Pact. Oakway consists of 9 full-time departments that are fully staffed fire departments, whereas Oakland County Mutual Aid is a combination of different types of departments. So their services aren't as readily available as the full-time departments. And then finally, I wanted to mention the National Institutes of Standards and Technology recently did studies showing the effectiveness of 2, 3, 4, or 5 people arriving on the scene at the same time. One of the problems with the public safety model is 1, 2 people arrive on the scene typically at different times. Initially, the full-time departments put 4 people on the scene immediately. They found that is far more effective. Fire loss goes down drastically. Life safety improves dramatically. As one of the previous speakers said, we are a representative government. You folks were elected to represent the citizens of your community.